Welcome, friends, to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. A very good day to you. I'd like to begin as usual by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. So welcome again, everyone. And I'd like to speak today on the topic of the self paradox. There can be some confusion regarding the Buddha's teachings on not self, because in the teachings we can see there is often, reference to us as being the owners of our karma, heirs to our karma, born of our karma, related to our karma, that we abide supported by our karma, that is our actions. And whatever karma we shall do, whatever actions we do of that, we will be the heirs. We will inherit, the results of our good or bad actions. And so there is this paradox of the encouragement towards virtuous living, the recognition of the importance of what we do, say, and think as individuals, and this teaching, this profound teaching on not self, that there is nothing that we experience that we can call me or mine. And typically the Buddha refers to the 5 khandha when he teaches on not self. The body, the feelings, the perceptions, the thought formations, the, ideas we have, the memories we have, the concepts we hold to, and the consciousness itself. The Buddha describes these 5 khandhas and invites us to investigate them and to recognize that we can appreciate when we investigate. There is nothing in any of these 5 khandhas that we can call me or mine, that we have any control over, that we cannot observe as constantly changing and therefore, subject to suffering. And so we can maybe examine a little bit, maybe investigate today this paradox of self, not self. There's a famous sutta I put in the suggested reading, Majjhima 38, which is the greater discourse on the destruction of craving. Wonderful teaching the Buddha gives, prompted by a monk called Sati, who was, we're told, the son of a fisherman, from a fisher clan. And Sati ordains, becomes a bhikkhu, and he is diligently practicing, following the Buddha's teachings, but he stumbles against this paradox. And he can't understand how it is that this consciousness doesn't cleave to, doesn't hold to, doesn't own, or isn't owned by the thoughts, words, and deeds that we perform, that we engage in throughout our lives. So he's of the firm belief that consciousness is me and mine, and also that consciousness, in a way, therefore moves forward through time, and therefore transmigrates from one life to another. So the understanding or the belief in rebirth was very prevalent in India in those days, what's now India, that part of the world. In those days, people generally had the understanding that rebirth was the way, was the reality. How could it not be so? Perhaps if you have that mindset, think, well, how is it that consciousness would just cease at death? And so perhaps it's easier, friends, to let go of the body as me and mine. Sati didn't seem to have an issue with that. Letting go of feelings as me and mine. We could say feelings are due to causes. Something pleasant comes along, pleasant feeling results. Something unpleasant comes along, unpleasant feeling results. Very much we can see due to cause and effect. Maybe we can let go of the sense of ownership there. But when it came to consciousness, Sati, the bhikkhu, was quite convinced that consciousness was himself, and that consciousness was a kind of accumulation of karma, of cause and effect, of action, good and bad, and that this conglomeration, this constellation would carry through in time and carry through to the next rebirth, and on and on and on. The Buddha called this a pernicious view, and he called Sati a foolish man, foolish bhikkhu. How could you hold to such a pernicious view? And then the Buddha gave the teachings that help us to deconstruct not just the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, but also consciousness itself, to deconstruct and to let go of the sense of ownership, the sense of self, the sense of anything holding together at all. And I'll go into the teachings a little bit more that the Buddha gave, particularly on dependent origination, also on nutriment as the cause of ongoing existence. But essentially the Buddha was saying that there is nothing we can pinpoint, we can hold to as a self. And when we look at reality with the wise gaze, seeing the three characteristics of impermanence, not self, and suffering, unsatisfactoriness, then we can learn, we can gradually come to an appreciation of the delusion that we're all harboring until we're not, until we're fully liberated, that delusion of some kind of involvement with our experience. And yet, in the monasteries, we chant very frequently the recollections on the 4 divine abidings and the chant relating to equanimity. The cultivation of equanimity is the recognition that we are all beings, including ourselves, are the owners of our karma and heirs to our karma, and that there is this carrying through. When a wholesome act is performed, a wholesome word is said, a wholesome thought arises, then there is a good result. And that is, in so many suttas, the Buddha explains the workings of karma. Very complex, impossible for us to fully grasp and understand, but we can appreciate the simplicity at this level of recognition that a wholesome thought, word, or deed leads to a good result, an unwholesome, unskillful thought, word, or deed leads to an unwholesome result, like an unhappy result, suffering. So to tease out and recognize that there is very much an imperative for us to cultivate the good. You know, there were many teachers at the time of the Buddha who taught, you know, kind of annihilationist, nihilistic approaches. And so we can maybe appreciate that as spiritual practitioners, we might lean towards this letting go to the extent, or unskillful letting go to the extent that we even let go of the idea that there's any point, any significance whatsoever to our actions, our thoughts, and our speech. If there's no me, how can there be any consequences? So there is this mistaken approach. If we veer too far in letting go of all agency, letting go of all responsibility, letting go of the recognition of the necessity really for virtue in our practice, this is going too far. And so many teachers at the time of the Buddha had reached this conclusion. There's nothing we do that matters. Everything's predestined was another very common belief at that time. It's all fate. We have no choice. We just have to flow along with it. We have no agency. Or that whatever we do, whether good or bad, is insignificant, meaningless, doesn't matter. One teacher at the time of the Buddha even went so far as to say, if we were to go along the bank of the Ganges River with I think it's like a sword or a knife or a cutting wheel or some such, and just cut up and destroy all the beings that we come across, commit mass murder of all beings, then there's no consequence to that. Dangerous views, friends. And also one teacher at the time of the Buddha taught this atomistic approach, that all things are made up of the elements. Well, that is true, but to the extent that because all things are made up of the elements, there's no such thing as harm. There's no such thing as good. There's only these microscopic elements that make up material things. So if you cut someone's head off, nothing's really happening. There's just a knife passing through space. It's meaningless to say that that is unskillful. So there is this middle way between the letting go that is overextending itself into letting go of recognition of virtue, of the importance of the wholesome, the need to move away from the unwholesome. The Buddha said, unskillful, foolish people are people who don't believe in cause and effect, who don't believe in consequences, who don't believe in responsibilities towards mother and father, community, who don't believe that there are wise ones to listen to and learn from. People who dismiss all of this are very foolish. And there were clearly plenty of people like that at the time of the Buddha, and also amongst the spiritual practitioners. So this extreme letting go of everything to the extent where we're kind of, in a way, just treading water. We're not practicing in any significant way at all. We're not working towards anything because we think there's no point. Everything's to be let go of. And the other end of that spectrum, the other extreme, would be the belief in a self, the holding and cleaving to me and mine, and that after death there's some return of this one, some continuity here. So this is the other end of the spectrum. On where we need to place ourselves is in the middle, to recognize that there is a paradox here. There is a paradox of self, this concept of self, me and mine. And the paradox is that we are indeed here in physical form as this person and that person, and we have agency and we have choices. And until we have fully appreciated reality and let go of all greed, hatred, and delusion, we are acting in the world, and we are the owners of our karma. There is responsibility, there is agency to recognize this, but also to be doing the work of investigating, to look at this body, look at this mind, and to see how it is that actually, although we, through ignorance, have a sense of continuity and of selfhood, in fact, this can be dismantled, this can be seen through. And it is the seeing through this sense of self that takes us forward in the path toward liberation. There is therefore, friends, we could say, conventional truth and there's ultimate truth, and we need to be able to hold these two. Conventional truth, there's this life, this body, this mind, and I have to take responsibility for this and practice with this in order to liberate this from all suffering. So, it's a journey of increasing clarity and wisdom, and it takes us from this conventional truth to the ultimate truth, which is the recognition that there is no self in the created or the uncreated. And for each one of us, it's a process, isn't it? So look, we can investigate whenever we feel a sense of holding to something, my thoughts, my views, my emotions, my physical experience. I find this can be very manifest when, for instance, the body is sick, there's illness, there's pain, discomfort in the body. It's very quick. It's very, I can say, sometimes overwhelming, the sense of me, the sense of my suffering, my illness. Or how about when we're assailed with strong emotion? Something happens and there's a flare up of anger or overwhelm or distress or grief when someone close to us is in trouble or sick or passes away. How strong then the sense of ownership can be that this is my suffering, this is happening to me. In the same way, when we have a strong view about something and, that idea is challenged by the circumstances around us or, by someone opposing our view in a way that we feel is wrong. The nature of views, friends, is that we feel they're right, don't they? Our views must be right. Otherwise, we wouldn't have those views. We'd have other views. So the sense of right and wrong can be very strong when we have views and opinions about things, and we tend to cleave to that sense of rightness. And when it's challenged, we can really have a very strong sense of identification with that. So look, we can, for each one of us, look at how it is that from time to time a very strong sense of identity comes up, sense of ownership, sense of need to hold to something, to an emotion or a thought or a feeling. And we can very compassionately remember then the Buddha's teaching on not self. And I think what I'd like to do is speak a little bit about one of the Buddha's very first teachings that he gave to his 5 spiritual companions at Varanasi. He'd been practicing for so long, the 6 of them together, before the Buddha became the Buddha. And the first people he wanted to share his insight with, his liberation teachings with, were these 5 companions. So he sought them out after he became the Buddha, after he became fully enlightened, didn't he? And he taught them a number of really important suttas, and one of them is this Anatta-lakkhana Sutta, teaching of not self. And the Buddha goes through, this very helpful investigation technique, way for us to look at where we may be deluded and unskillfully, unhelpfully holding to a sense of self. So let's have a look at Anatta-lakkhana Sutta. I'm just going to briefly summarize, essentially, the teaching here. So the Buddha speaks, as I mentioned before, in terms of the 5 khandha. So he asks his disciples, his friends and now disciples, to consider the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts and consciousness. This is what we can know. This is our experience put into these 5 categories for us for clarity. So everything we can experience is one of these 5 khandhas. So to then look at our experience and to note, consider, how much control do we have over these? How much control do we have over the body? Can we stop it aging? Can we stop it hurting? Can we make it well when it's sick? We have a certain amount of agency, but actually when we really look at it, it's quite obvious to us, isn't it, friends, that this body has its own trajectory and it is completely out of our control. And the same with feelings. Can we make ourselves feel in a certain way? No, we're going to feel depending on the impingement upon us, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. We are subject to these feelings, and the best we can do is observe them and develop some dispassion towards them. The same with perceptions. They are learned, one could say, but we can't unlearn them except through meditation, through investigation. They come and go. We have certain ways of seeing the world, and we can't control that. They come about through cause and effect. The same with our thoughts. Actually, isn't it the case when we meditate, we start to notice how it is that thought has its own flow, its own energy, its own momentum. Thoughts come and go, and we can get to the very fortunate and blessed opportunity through our practice to observe them, to see how thinking manifests. And as we become skilled at observing our thoughts, we can see how they are flowing in their own way. We can't force ourselves to think in certain ways. We can't make ourselves not think in other ways. Thoughts arise and pass due to causes and conditions. And we're beginning here, as I'm speaking, I'm noting that, the insight becomes more and more profound as we investigate the mind, because we can come to the point where consciousness itself, we can recognize, we didn't make it happen. We can't stop it happening. We don't control it. Consciousness arises due to causes and conditions. Did we choose to be born? No. Consciousness came into being in this life, in this form. There is no control of this. And in Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the Buddha goes on to say, well, look, recognize that if any of these aspects of our experience were self, were ours, kind of belong to us, they would not lead to affliction because we wouldn't choose that. And it would be possible to have of them, well, let them be thus, let them not be thus. But it's because they are not self that they do lead to affliction, and it is not possible to have it of them. Let them be thus, let them not be thus. We can't make things happen. We can't make our experiences. Our experiences are flowing according to cause and effect. They are dhammas that we can observe. And in this process of recognition, no control here, we can start to slowly ease away from the identification with our experience, can't we, friends? The Buddha goes on to say in Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, he says, look, can you consider with all of these 5 khandhas, are they permanent or are they impermanent? And this is something we can not just take as a teaching, as an intellectual exercise, but contemplate. Is there anything in this body that is permanent, even for a moment? As we develop our meditation practice, we start to recognize, don't we, friends, that things are changing so rapidly. There's nothing that stays the same even for a moment. This is something to consider. If this is not your experience, we can certainly consider how the body changes over time. All of us can note how it is that this body is clearly and obviously not permanent. Anyone can appreciate that. Everyone knows these bodies get old, get sick, and then die. And so to really keep considering this, and the same with our feelings, the Buddha said, like drops, bubbles in a pond or in a, say, fizzy drink, arising and passing. Our feelings are so rapidly changing, shifting and changing. Are they permanent? No, of course not. We can't hold a feeling for very long at all. We could try, we can experiment and see how long we can feel. Say anger. It's a very good exercise. If one is angry, when anger arises, we can see how long it lasts. And just wait and see if we can extend or prolong it beyond its natural life. It's actually very helpful to do this, friends, to help us to stop identifying with anger. Anger and energy that arises. Anger's like you put some fuel on a fire and it flares up. That's anger. It's natural. It's a consequence of some cause or other. We can observe that. And we can see how long it lasts and recognize then how it too is impermanent. When we're assailed by strong emotion, we can feel, can't we, that this is everything. It's like we forget all about before and after, and we're just completely absorbed in the experience. But of course, what we can notice through life, and certainly with our practice, becomes very obvious is that, well, no, these things don't last. Everything's changing. Thank goodness. When it comes to suffering, oh dear, when it comes to pleasure, all things are changing. So how can we hold on to our suffering, and how can we wish to hold on to our pleasure? And so through these insights, the letting go quite naturally begins to happen, doesn't it, friends? So the Buddha invited the monks to consider, the monastics around him, the people around him, are these experiences permanent or impermanent? And the answer was impermanent, Venerable Sir. And then the Buddha went on to say, well, is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? And again, this is something to bring into our meditation practice. Is it suffering or happiness that things are constantly changing? Pleasant feelings change. That's not very easy for us. That's suffering for us. Unpleasant feelings change. That's sometimes a relief, but generally not for very long, because then they'll change again. So we're on this roller coaster ride, up and down, in terms of feelings, in terms of all of our experience. There's nothing stable. There's nothing solid. There's nothing dependable, reliable. There's nothing substantial. There's no refuge here. And the conclusion we can come to when we consider the response that was given to the Buddha when he asked this question was, actually, it's suffering. It's suffering that we're on shifting sands, that we can't rely on anything. There's uncertainty all around. This is suffering. This is not happiness for us. The Buddha goes on to say, so is what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change, is it fit to be regarded as me, as mine, as myself? And the answer, of course, was no, Venerable Sir. So this way of investigating, friends, our experience, we can bring in again and again, because the delusion of self, the illusion of self is very strong for us. It's something to wear away. It's something to continually investigate and see where that investigation takes us. And the beauty of this is that, yes, where constant change is essentially suffering for us, to open to the recognition, open to the truth of not self, is actually a great relief for us, to be able to let go of cleaving and holding to suffering, to that which is suffering, to that which is changeable. So to open to this understanding of not self brings us some degree of relief, some degree of spiritual happiness, insight, wisdom, peace. And the more we let go, the more peace we can experience. In this sutta, the Buddha then goes on to say, well, therefore, if we can't hold to any sense of me or mine or myself, therefore, let's consider, let's bring in the understanding that any past, future, or present sense of self, inside or outside, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all should be seen as it really is, with correct wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. So all of our past experience, all of our future experience, in any way, both inside and also looking around us, friends, we can see that there is nothing holding together to create, to form, to make any permanent entities whatsoever. Everything's flowing. Everything can be deconstructed. And this is the way to freedom. This is the way to ever greater wisdom and insight that leads us inexorably towards the peace of Nibbana. So this beautiful teaching that the Buddha gave was a liberating teaching for his disciples there. And so it is for us. He said, when we see things clearly in this way, just keep pulling apart, letting things fall apart, recognizing the sense of self as an illusion, a delusion. When we practice in this way, he said, the instructed noble disciple experiences a turning away from the Dhammas, a turning away from things, a turning away from our experience, nibbida, a kind of weariness or a revulsion, a dispassion comes in, and there's a turning away from that sense of ownership, that sense of involvement. We're starting to extricate ourselves from suffering, friends. And in this way, we become dispassionate. And in this development of dispassion, we're moving towards liberation. And so in this beautiful sutta, we have all the advice that we really need to investigate this paradox of self, to recognize, there is no self. There is no self to be found. And wisely to recognize that there are causes and that we have a duty, a responsibility to develop the good, to avoid harm, to purify our hearts within samsara, even when we appreciate that there is nothing of continuity here. So look, what is the result of this understanding of the paradox of self? It is that we continually let go, and at the same time, we strive to avoid harm and to do good. Why? Because we're going to benefit in the future? No, we strive to avoid harm and to do good because it is good to do that, because it is wholesome, because it has a good result. Not for me, not for mine. It just does. It's very helpful for us to appreciate, those who study Pali, how it is that in the Pali language, in the teachings of the Buddha, there's not the same sense of personhood that we have in most of our languages that we speak today. That is the me, mine, the I, the you. What are they called? The pronouns. The pronouns are very seldom used in Pali. The only place where the Buddha consistently brings in personal pronouns is when he's describing, as in Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the delusion of self. So he'll bring in the personal pronouns, this is me, this is mine, this is myself, only to highlight that this is an erroneous way of relating to the world of experience. So it's really interesting. The Pali language itself helps us because it's a very insightful language. It's impersonal. So the teachings are given in a very objective and impersonal way. And we don't always pick that up because when they're translated into our modern day languages, then the personal creeps in the language itself. This is because the delusion of self is so strong for us. Of course, it's there in our languages. Our languages reflect it. But in the Pali language, there is less of that. So this is very helpful for us. To appreciate the paradox of self is to keep letting go of the illusion of self, moving towards greater insight, and also to recognize our responsibility within this field of experience to put in what is good, to avoid what is harmful. So, friends, this really naturally leads into, well, what is the middle way here? How to hold reality in a skillful way for liberation. And so the Buddha gave Sati the fisherman, who was convinced that consciousness must be me and mine and must continue through time, he gave him the teaching on dependent origination. Dependent origination was the insight of the Buddha that he had when he became the Buddha. We're told that he sat under the Bodhi tree for 7 days after his enlightenment, and that he then moved around the area where he became liberated, became the Buddha. This was Bodh Gaya, of course. At that time, it was forest and countryside next to a river, the Naranja River. He moved around, but he spent days at a time sitting in different places, contemplating, considering, deepening his understanding of what he had realized. And so we're told. And the Buddha had this understanding come to him of dependent origination or codependent arising. This is the way to find the middle. This is the way to resolve the paradox of self. The way that we can appreciate how it is that our actions are significant, our thoughts and words have great moment, we have agency, but also that there is no self. So, friends, dependent origination begins with ignorance. The Buddha said this is the cause of all of this. It's due to ignorance, it's due to not seeing clearly. And as a result of ignorance, sankhara come into existence, that is, thought formations. Thought formations are tinged with ignorance. The thought, the concept, for example, of selfhood comes about due to not seeing clearly. It comes about due to ignorance. Thoughts of me, of mine, of myself. These are the most pervasive manifestations of ignorance that keep us suffering. So, due to ignorance, ideas and concepts come about tinged with ignorance. And as a result of that, so consciousness arises. Consciousness that takes rebirth over and over again in forms arises because of mental formations tinged with ignorance. And this consciousness leads to mind and body in all different forms, many different lifetimes. Here we are. And having a mind and a body, the result is the 6 senses, this interaction with the external world through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. And so we're forming a sense of self through this lifetime, lifetime after lifetime. We've come into being steeped in this ignorance, and we are then interacting with the world in such a way. The Buddha said through the six senses there is contact, and through this contact with all that is around, there's then a sense of me and that, self and other, inside and outside, that comes about through contact. Then there's feeling. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral experiences come about, and through feeling there is the kind of engine of liking and disliking that comes into play. Pleasant feeling, I want more of it. Unpleasant feeling, I want to get away from it. Neutral feeling, I'm not aware of it, or I'm just contented with that. Becoming arises as a result of feeling. There's a movement, there's a push and pull, there's a relationship with that feeling. And then becoming, wanting more, wanting less, doing this, doing that, this agency comes about. Becoming leads to, rather, feeling leads to the craving, the wanting things to be otherwise or wanting things to be thus. Craving leads to clinging, and clinging leads to becoming. So there's a cascade of relationship with feeling, holding to feeling in such a way that we want to manipulate, we want to argue in a way with the way things are, we want to make things certain ways, we want to control the way things are. So craving, clinging, becoming. And through becoming, this momentum of selfing and of agency and of choice and of reaching forward in different ways, so rebirth comes about. So this consciousness steeped in ignorance will keep going through samsara. There is this momentum. And look, this explanation of how it is that we're here and how we're operating, if we're not mindful, if we're not waking up to our predicament, this is the middle way for us. There is a sense of self, it is an illusion, but we can, having taken birth, friends, having come into existence, we can, to make the most of this experience, we can open to path, open to wisdom, open to insight, which is to open to letting go of all the ignorance that has brought this to pass. And that core element of ignorance, that core false idea, that sankhara, the sense of self, the belief that this is me, that this is mine, this we can begin to dismantle. And so it is we can bring in the Buddha's teachings on dependent origination. This was his way of explaining to us how it is that we have a all-pervasive sense of self. We're swimming in it. It's the ocean that we're swimming in. The sense of me, my life, my trajectory, my family, my community, my history, my culture, and so forth. That we're swimming in this and that there is a way out of this. And to really recognize that all of this experience is steeped in suffering because we're holding to a sense of self. The suffering doesn't manifest for us when we let go of the sense of self, friends, because then how can I suffer when there's no I to suffer? Who can suffer in that case? There is pleasant, there is painful, but there is no body who is assailed with these feelings, thoughts, perceptions. This body has its own trajectory. It's perfectly natural. It's born, it ages, it passes away. How wonderful, how natural, how fine that is. It's the sense of self. When that comes in, when our experience is tinged with this sense of ownership, that is when suffering comes about. That is the cause of suffering. And so as we investigate suffering further, as we investigate the sense of self further, as we investigate impermanence, all of these characteristics of reality, these ways of experiencing reality wisely, lead us to freedom from suffering. And with that freedom from suffering, as we let go of the sense of self, as we appreciate and understand the paradox of self, so we can begin to experience peace. Peace becomes apparent to us. Slowly, inexorably, we can start to relax. So friends, I'd like to invite all of us to keep investigating the sense of self, the paradox of self, recognizing that, there is no self to be found in the created or the uncreated. And there is responsibility, there is duty, there is an imperative for us to practice well, develop the good, let go of the unskillful, keep purifying these hearts. And in this way, living skillfully in tune with Dhamma, according to Dhamma, respecting our teachers, respecting our elders, caring for our parents, appreciating responsibilities that we have in this world. In these ways, skillful ways, we allow ourselves to set the conditions, allow for enough peace and well-being, freedom from remorse, that we can develop deeper insight into the nature of reality. So from the mundane, the conventional truth, we move towards the ultimate truth. Amen. Thank you for your kind attention, friends. Allow me to have a look at the chat and see if there's any questions or comments to share together. We've got some time, which is great. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Minal. Hello to Maria, Sud, Jayantha, Madeline. Good afternoon. Edward, Heike, Christopher, Thai friend, MD Redwan. Greetings to you all. Tora, Gregory. Wonderful to see that you're all here on the live stream. Appreciate your presence. And I'm just seeing if there's some comments to share now. Okay, from Heike. Thank you, Heike. Hello. Warm wishes to you too, and to us all. Yeah, it's a good topic. It's a almost slightly daunting topic, I found. Once I put the title into the, I have to choose a title for every Dhamma session. I then felt somewhat daunted by this topic, which I barely scraped the surface of, friends. Heike says, I'm currently working with the book Beyond Eye Making by Ajahn Tiradamo and trying to gain a deeper understanding. That is a great reference for us, friends, which I'm noting myself. Ajahn Tiradama's Beyond Eye Making. Let's read it, friends. Let's consider the teachings of this great monk. Thank you, Heike. And Christopher says, for Majjhima 38, that's the discourse on the greater mass of craving, the destruction of craving. For Majjhima 38, the world is created by 6 sense bases, consciousness. If 6 sense bases absent, world ceases, unconscious. Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Oh, there's another part to this. Since everything's impermanent, it also means soul is impermanent. That's why anatta correct. Yeah, absolutely, Christopher. Everything is impermanent. And so there's nothing we can hold to or put together or maintain as a permanent soul or self. And coming back to your previous point, the world is created by 6 sense bases. Right. Well, looking at that dependent origination, the 6 sense bases are the result of having a body and mind, which is the result of rebirth, the result of the consciousness that comes about as a result of the delusions, the suffering that is unfinished business. So there is ignorance that propels consciousness, that propels rebirth, that propels the body, the mind, the six senses that then interact with the world to either create more suffering, or if we take up a spiritual path, enable us to free ourselves from that suffering. To language is tricky, isn't it, friends? Free ourselves means to enable freedom from suffering. So the world created by six sense bases, in a way, our experience of the world is created by our ability to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think. Yes, without that ability to see, hear, taste, smell, touch, and think, then there's that much less consciousness in the field. You know, looking at somebody, for instance, who's blind, there's not that seeing consciousness in that case. The other aspects of consciousness are playing out. If they're absent, if they're all absent, there is no consciousness. There is a relationship between mind and body and the six senses. The six senses result from rebirth, from having a mind and body, and they enable and create a relationship of input from outside, and this gives us a sense of continuity, of selfhood, of existing at all. And so it goes from this place, from contact. There is this relationship with the world which is tinged with liking and disliking, with craving, in short, with clinging, with more becoming. And so it goes on. This is part of what it is to exist, for sure. I hope that meets your question, Christopher. Thank you. And I've got something here from MD Redwan. Yeah. He's asking for some support. Anyone who wants to take up on that, I'll just leave it here for a moment. Sick father, no income, emergency, friends. Anyone who feels the wish to support this friend. And MD Redwan, please receive our kindness, our loving kindness, our compassion, and our friendship, and good wishes to you, dear friend. And Heike says, I'm puzzled by what it is that recognizes someone from a shared past life. The Buddha made references to someone being reborn in a certain realm, and this couple who were his parents in numerous lives. What is it that knows this? Yeah, that is such a good question, Heike. That really touches this self-paradox, doesn't it? Because the Buddha, in the Jataka tales, we learn that the Buddha shared often, didn't he, about past lives and relationships with others, and yet the sense from the Jataka tales that the Buddha was coming into birth with the same people over and over and over again. They had a shared journey through samsara. And we might feel, friends, I've had this experience myself of meeting people and having a very strong feeling of recognition. It's you again. It's very interesting to have this kind of experience. What can we learn from this? What can we glean from this? Perhaps we could appreciate that within the field of consciousness, there are aspects that meet and re-meet over time and space again and again. And, you know, the Buddha himself, his story, the Bodhisattva journey was one of choosing constantly to keep coming back in all different forms in order to purify the heart to the extent that the parami, the virtues, were highly developed, and that this is the journey of a bodhisattva. So what do we make of all that? There is, I would say, in this self-paradox, we're able to be free from the sense of self when we're fully liberated, and we can see clearly then that there is no continuity anywhere, in any way whatsoever. But until we're fully liberated, liberation, Buddhahood, arahantship, that clarity manifests. Until that time, until that happening, there is a sense of self that can carry through. And this was what Sati the fisherman's son was grappling with, strong sense of continuity. This strong sense of continuity can be there for us, but we can appreciate that this strong sense of continuity, the sense of recognition, the sense of many lifetimes together, is steeped in ignorance, is a delusion, ultimately speaking. But we can have these experiences. They are to be seen through, they are to be let go of, but we can appreciate, yeah, ignorance manifests in these ways, and it can be quite amazing sometimes. And the Buddha himself had that journey of selfing until he became the Buddha, and that self could fall away completely. No self means peace. No self means freedom. No self ultimately leads us to Nibbana. But in the journey, in the getting there, we are working with a sense of self in all different ways, friends. And we can appreciate that. So yeah, thank you for that, Heike. Really, really points to the self paradox, doesn't it? These experiences. And Madeline says, thank you, Madeline. Irish is expressed in a non-possessive way. We say to bron orm. Sorry if I'm not saying that properly. I'm trying to learn Irish, but very slowly. To bron orm, meaning there is sadness on me. Really useful for understanding not self. Yes, yes. That's a beautiful way of understanding, right there in the Irish language. How interesting, friends. There are probably other languages too that have more insightful ways of describing what's actually happening that help then those who speak those languages to be that little bit freer of delusion, of ignorance. Because when a feeling arises, when a feeling descends, when a feeling manifests, it is as if, isn't it, friends, that comes over, that impinges, that is not me, it's not mine. There's something which can know feeling and experience feeling in just that way, something that covers us over for a while, something that influences for a while. Yes. Thank you, Madeline. To Bron Orm. And we have a comment from Sud. Thank you, Sud. It makes sense that suffering exists, but if there's no self, then who's suffering? Exactly the question that would come up again and again, isn't it, Sud? For the Buddha, he would be asked this again and again. Who is it that's suffering? Yeah, this is our journey, friends, to investigate. Who is it that's suffering when there is suffering? To note that, as I said earlier, when there's suffering, when there's a strong suffering in the body, some painful emotion, some painful thought or concept, when there's suffering, we will always meet, when we investigate that suffering, we'll always find that there is a sense of self. So indeed there is a who who is suffering. But when we investigate further, we can begin to free ourselves up from that sense of somebody suffering, and we get to see that shift happen. Isn't it, Sud? Where I'm suffering turns into there is painful feeling, there is painful emotion, there is uncomfortable thoughts, perceptions here. And even that shift can go further as we investigate further, and it becomes something like there is strong, intense, sharp, cutting, pulsating feeling, coming and going. There is thoughts, unwholesome, unskillful, coming and going. There are perceptions tinged with ignorance, coming and going. And so we can recognize when we investigate suffering, the possibility of letting go of that sense of self. And that possibility of letting go of the sense of self is the opening to letting go of that suffering. And they are inextricably bound one to another. So the question, who is suffering, is an acute question for us. It's an invitation for us to look at that. What is the suffering here? And who is the who that is suffering? And keep investigating, and all of it falls apart, all of it dismantles, all of it will fall away for us. So thank you, Sud. Suffering exists when there is a self. Suffering does not exist when that sense of self is put aside. Then there's just intense feeling, strong sensation, painful thought arising and passing. Just that. And we start to flow with reality, don't we, friends? We start to really be letting go consistently. We're like the Teflon pan that nothing can stick to. We start to flow with Dhamma, and there is no suffering in this willingness to let go of the stickiness, the stickiness that is the sense of self, the stickiness that is the holding to suffering, that's holding to a sense of anything lasting whatsoever. Anicca anatta dukkha. Let's open our hearts to these ways of seeing reality, the truth of the way things are, impermanent, impersonal, unsatisfactory, and allow ourselves to step free from suffering, step by step. May the path unfold for us all in this way. Thanks, Aika, for your kind comment. Thank you, friends, for your wise attention, wonderful questions and comments, and for this opportunity for us to practice together. So precious. Let's finish with, as usual, with 3 heartfelt sadhus, celebrating and respecting our teacher, the Buddha. Sadhu, 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 anumodana.